Good afternoon and evening, and I'm calling the Ames Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Policy Committee meeting to order for Tuesday, February 13th. Welcome, committee members. Thank you for coming. One item on the agenda, and we'll let Kyle take over and share what about the tip.
I'll actually turn it over to Sherry. She's the one that headed up this effort. So.
All right. Hi there. So the Iowa DOT requires MPOs to develop coordinated passenger transportation plans, or PTPs, for their areas in coordination with their transit advisory group. The MPO does that process through the Story County Transportation Collaboration Committee. FTA, or the Federal Transit Administration, requires that all Section 5310 funding that specifically benefits the elderly and individuals with disabilities to be coordinated through the PTP process. Projects funded with elderly and disabled funding must be identified in the PTP prior to be included in other planning programs that the MPO has, such as the Transportation Improvement Program and subsequent grant applications. The PTP identifies other projects, though, benefiting the general public to provide input into the long-range transportation plan as well. So the MPO's next PTP is due by May 1st, 2024. The last plan was completed 5 years ago in 2019. And at least 2 coordination meetings occur annually. And the minutes from those meetings are submitted to the Iowa DOT when the full plan is not due that year. Overall, the plan consists of 5 different sections with an appendices containing the meeting minutes that are required. The 5 areas are process, how the PTP was completed throughout the year, the inventory and profile discussion, coordination issues, and the priorities that will eventually develop into projects for grant applications, and then funding, federal, state, and local funding that's available to help meet those strategies and priorities. The priorities that the Story County Transportation Collaboration Committee recommended to the MPO for approval are on page 46 of the plan, but they are our dial-a-ride service, which is SciRide's ADA passenger transportation service that we contract out to HERTA Public Transit, our dial-a-ride buses that we purchase, bus shelters, improvements, and accessibility technology, including automatic vehicle annunciators, the signage that goes along with that, the vehicle location system that is behind the scenes to make those annunciators work, and passenger counters, as well as the preventative maintenance to make all the technology go smooth throughout the year. We have to pay an annual preventative maintenance fee. So on February 1st, the MPO Technical Committee reviewed the draft plan and recommended it to the MPO Policy Committee. After that meeting, the draft plan was shared with the Iowa DOT for their input and review of the plan, as well as back to the Story County Transportation Collaboration for their comments and review. Those comments will come back to the MPO by March 1st for any changes or modifications to be incorporated into the final PTP. So once the draft is approved here today, a 30-day public comment period will begin, and then that will go through March 14th. Any comments received from the public will be documented into the appendix and incorporated into the final plan. The final PTP will be brought back to the MPO Policy Committee for a public hearing and formal approval on March 26th. If anybody has any questions about the plan itself, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
So just really quickly, so there's a Story County aspect of this, and it's heavily SciRide. What portion of these proposals are related to the county in general, and what percentage are with the city of Ames?
Well, the PTP is for the Ames metropolitan area. It's not for Story County itself. Although our transportation collaboration group does talk about countywide transportation service, but it's exclusively for SciRide and the, I guess, the services that we provide.
Okay. And then final question I had, I actually tried to make some progress. It's 180 pages. Are there like two or three, like, what are the high level things that you think that we should be taking from 180 pages?
I think the high level is the 4 required projects that the transportation collaboration approved to be in the plan. Those need to be in the plan in order to get subsequent grant funding. It's the reason for doing the whole entire process. But I will say that the actual coordination efforts help SIRIDE when we go out for national discretionary grants and need letters of support from human service agencies and organizations throughout the metropolitan area. It's extremely important. We go into grant applications and have 20 plus letters of support on a national level. So I think that are discretionary grant applications to
Great.
Washington, D.C.
Great. That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Other questions? Sure, you saw you have quite a contingent of groups that seem to contribute or participate. Is that pretty consistent in terms of they meet? There's a lot of human service agencies that are trying to help meet the needs of those who may be transportation challenged. Are they really helpful in terms of giving their perspective, and how is your committee taking that into account when you make decisions, recommendations?
I would say the transportation collaboration has over maybe between 15 and 20 participants on a reoccurring basis. We now meet online since the pandemic, no longer in person. So I think that helps facilitate more participation, actually. But like I said, I think having those groups and contacts for me personally, and being able to reach out and get those letters of support for grant applications helps immensely. It's made successful grant applications for SIRIDE, for battery electric buses, for articulated buses. I never would have thought that we would have had automatic passenger counters on our whole entire fleet. I think, 4 years ago, we didn't have annunciators, we didn't have passenger counters, and didn't have a new AVL system. So I think it's benefited greatly.
Great. All right. So, if no further questions, I would entertain a motion on the accepting of the, actually, gotta get back to my agenda here. Is there a motion approving the draft FFY 2025-2029 passenger transportation plan and setting March 26th, 2024 as a date of public hearing?
So
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you for coming. Policy Transportation Committee comments. Tim, anything? Bill?
Nope.
Mayor Pop? Supervisor Merkin?
yes. For me.
Anything else? All right. With that, entertain motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Okay. Well, good evening. Call the meeting for the Ames City Council to order for Tuesday, February 13th. Welcome everybody in the audience. And tonight we're going to go through and do a budget wrap up to start with, and then we'll transition into our regular meeting once our wrap up is done. So with that, we'll turn it over to, I think, Brian, you're going to go through item number 1. Is that correct?
Parts of it, yes. Thank you, Mayor. So the first item on our agenda to discuss for budget presentations is public art. The Public Art Commission, historically, the council has allocated $46,000 each year to the Public Art Commission. And we're recommending the same again for this year, for the upcoming fiscal year. The Public Art Commission uses these funds for the Ames Annual Outdoor Sculpture Exhibition, along with the Art in Parks program and the Neighborhood Art program. Any unused funds at the end of the year continue to roll over so that PAC can accumulate funds for a larger project every couple of years. I do want to point out that in your packet, there's a memo from the Public Art Commission. They specifically requested that of funding, excuse me, if there is general fund available balance, that $150,000 that be allocated to a signature art piece for Schenker Plaza across the street. That was something that was included several years ago in the budget for Schenker Plaza, but we had to eliminate it in order to address some cost overruns in the construction contract for the plaza. So they're asking to put that back in. I'm happy to entertain any questions about the Public Art Commission.
Any questions for Brian on public art?
How long have we done the same amount?
I think it's been at least 7 or 8 years, the same amount each year. Now, yeah, as long as I can remember staffing PAC, it's been that amount. PAC hasn't spent all of the money each year. So right now they have a pretty healthy carryover, I think, of something like $100,000. So I don't think that additional funds would be put to use right away. But certainly if a specific project comes up like the Plaza Art, PAC is willing to let the council know, and we can look at some one-time money to accomplish that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Is there a reason that if they have that balance, that we're being asked for the whole 150,000 for the sculpture?
They do have some projects that they are working towards. So for example, the Art in the Parks program, historically what PAC will do is take some chunk of money out of that 46,000 the council allocates each year, maybe 5 or 10,000, and they'll sock that away into the Art in the Parks budget. They'll let that build for a couple of years, and then they'll do a larger Art in the Parks project, like the sculpture that was just contracted for Tahira and Labhira Park. Or they'll use that balance for things like the Ice Arena mural, which sort of came up as a new project. So they have some regular expenses for the sculpture exhibition and to purchase some sculptures for neighborhoods, but they do continue to find uses for the money that they get. I think they do have some pending projects right now for sculptures in the roundabouts along University Boulevard, and that's going to be a larger project that I think they'll use some of that balance for. And then also they're working with Cyride on a project to put sculptures at Cyride shelters. Or at the locations of those shelters. So I think they have plans that will eat into that balance. So the $46,000 will help them accomplish the recurring programs that they do.
Brian, is the Art Commission paying for the demolition of the pillars downtown, or is that coming out of a different budget?
I think what we did there was we agreed to split that expense between PAC funding and road use tax funding because it's in the right of way.
And as a side note, do you know when that's going to happen?
I do not. Okay. I know that Public Works is working on putting together the spec for it. That got delayed a little bit because we had some weather and they needed to focus on that and work on some FEMA grant potential money related to that, the weather that we had last month. So that putting together the spec kind of went on the back burner for a couple of weeks, but I did expect that it would come out here in the next few weeks.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions regarding public art? All right, let's move on to arts funding, CODA.
So CODA, Commission on the Arts for Performing Arts Funding, the council authorized CODA to allocate $240,931. The commission has reviewed the grants that were requested for funding this year, and they're recommending $233,016 in grants to the agencies, and then an additional $7,915 would be held in reserve for spring and fall special project grants. That these are unique opportunities that come up that may not be foreseen at the time that the annual grant application went in, and these are typically smaller awards of around $1,000 or less. There is a little bit of a hiccup that's discussed in the memo. So for the 2022-2023 annual grants, KHOI Radio received a grant, and there was KHOI did not draw down its money by the end of the 23 fiscal year. CODA asked for some clarification on KHOI's final grant report, and that final report didn't get approved until later in the fall. So KHOI recently came back and said, okay, now that the annual grant report is finalized, can we draw down the money? Well, that should have been done back last fiscal year. That money ended up being returned to the fund balance, the local option sales tax fund balance. So we're asking if the council wishes to allow KHOI to draw down the funds that it was awarded last year. The council would need to allocate $7,600 of additional funding in the local option sales tax fund for KHOI this year, and then authorize us to pay that out. So that would be in addition to the $240,931 for next year's grant awards. So that's a bit of an unusual circumstance. I did want to mention one of the commissioners, Nancy Gephardt, is here to answer questions if the council has any, although before the meeting she told me she prefers that the council not have questions. But I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions if you need a commissioner perspective.
Brian, how have we handled similar situations in the past? I don't want to wrap myself around a pole for a small amount, but I think it's valuable that we act consistently. So any sense of the history on this?
Yeah, I can't recall a time that it's occurred maybe this late that this came to our attention. Typically, if there's a foreseen, a circumstance that's going to prevent an agency from drawing down its money, we've talked about carrying it forward and then we let them draw it down. My understanding is that they've accomplished all the things that they were supposed to have accomplished in the grant. So I wouldn't see any reason why they shouldn't receive that money. It is a smaller dollar amount, but I think in the scale of that agency, that's a substantial amount, is my sense. So it's really up to the council if you feel like you want to go out of your way to accommodate that and allow them to draw down that funding. We can make it work.
Not the same issue, but we've been flexible in the past, right?
Yeah.
And
Council has.
so do you see a motion on this right now? I don't know.
No, we'll pick it up here when we do a amendments to the current
Do it
budget.
all at the same time? All right.
I have two questions, Brian, one of which might not be for you.
Okay.
Might have an opportunity for a commissioner to speak. First question is, is KHOI now clear on what's required from them for reporting on these grants? Because we had another one after that in 23, 24 that was awarded according to our document.
Oh, yes, they're being recommended for
And,
for the current,
well,
current year,
we had the 22, 23 that did not get
right.
drawn down. in
Yes,
time.
they have a current year award as well.
And they're clear for this year what is necessary for them to report? Because that seemed to be the hang up last time, right? There is clarification required.
Yeah, I think the issue about the final report is cleared up. I wouldn't imagine that that's a question any longer. So I wouldn't imagine that that would continue to be an error or issue that needs to be resolved after the fact. And we can certainly make it clear to agencies to draw down the money. And
Mhm.
normally, an outstanding final report wouldn't cause a current year grant reimbursement to be withheld. So we would have paid KHOI the money if they had asked for it.
Mhm.
But I think they had the impression that they couldn't ask for it until the final report was approved, which is not the normal process.
Okay.
We would hold future payments based on a final report not being approved, but not current year ones.
Okay. And then my second question has to do with the allocations for this year. And maybe you know the answer to this. It seems odd to me that we have 5 or 6 agencies, maybe 5 agencies that actually went down in their allocation this year from last year. And then we've got one that had a large increase this year. So I'm just curious, it doesn't seem typical that we're lowering the allocations. So I'm wondering what caused that and also why, which is it, Story Theater Company got a really large increase.
Well, I'm not sure that I can answer the question about Story Theater Company specifically. I would point out there were 4 new agencies receiving money this year. And anytime you're adding a significant number of agencies receiving funding that outpaces the new money that's available, that means it's got to come from someplace else. So I think part of it is just spreading that money to more agencies. I don't know if Nancy might provide a little more perspective about the rationale for the specific amounts that were arrived at. I do know that each of the commissioners makes their recommendations individually, and then we look at all of that all at one time and try to reconcile it, and it just sort of washes out the way that it washes out. And then they discuss any concerns that they might have. But once they saw all the numbers, they felt like it was an acceptable spread of money. So
I'm not necessarily saying it's unacceptable.
No,
I'm just curious about the rationale.
I think the only thing that I would add is that one thing that we looked at very specifically this year was how many of these organizations have significant cash reserves and which ones do not. And so I think some of the organizations that you're seeing maybe their allocation went down were able to put quite a bit of money in previous years into their cash reserves. So they have a little bit more fluidity there, where ones like you mentioned, Story Theater Company specifically, do not have that kind of savings account that they can draw from. And then the other thing with that organization, looking at the quantity of art that they produce is also a significant factor.
Thank you.
So you said that they have significant cash reserves. Is that reserves left over from previously being funded by CODA and not being used? Is that what you're saying?
That's not anything that I would be able to tell from the
Okay.
budget sheets that they give us. This is just basically an Excel document that kind of combines all of their assets, and one of those lines is just what they have in cash.
Okay. Any questions for Kathy? Thank you.
I'm Nancy, but thank you.
I'm sorry.
My mom is
Is-
Kathy, so she would.
Any other questions regarding CODA? All right, move on to asset.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How's everyone? So I do want to make note here. We have Paul Goldbeck with us tonight. So I get to move into training mode here after this evening, and I'm very happy and very pleased to do that, to help bring her along in the process. And then we also have one of the asset volunteers, Becky Harker. She's sitting behind me. Becky is going to move into her second term on asset, and she's going to be the chair as of April. So we're pleased with that role that she'll be taking on. Our other asset volunteers are not able to be with us tonight. Those are Mike Lazier, Nick Joes, Ed Jalot, Kathy Guillen, and then we have a vacancy that we'll be filling there too. But definitely want to recognize all of them for their work throughout the process. It's very important, very time consuming, as you know, and they all are great to work with. So you have the report that outlines the allocation process that was wrapped up in January. Just to recap, the total amount available from the city into the process for fiscal year 25 is $1,924,578. So that was a 5% increase over the previous fiscal year. So it was a little over $91,000 more into the process.
Excuse me, Deb, I know that council's fully aware of asset, but we have a bunch of visitors here that I think
Sure.
are here on a school assignment. Maybe you could spend a couple minutes explaining what asset is, because it's not just more or less something that's valuable to, it's not a built environment, but it's actually something else. So maybe just explain what asset does.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with the acronym. The acronym means Analysis of Social Services Evaluation Team, and it's a collaborative process involving the City of Ames, Story County, the Board of Supervisors, United Way and their executive board, and then Iowa State Student Government. And so there's almost $5 million that those entities bring together to the table to fund our human services organizations here in Ames and Story County. And those organizations provide services, rent and utility assistance, childcare, emergency shelter, transportation, food pantries, just a whole host of services that are supported here in the community and are unique to our community, and the asset process is unique. And each of the funders in the process have priorities on what they want to fund for services. And then we rely on volunteers that are appointed and approved to carry out the tasks of asset, which means they visit with the agencies, they write up reports, they review the budgets, they look at the funder priorities, and then we have marathon meetings in January to make those allocations that we're bringing to you tonight. So it's a very comprehensive process, and again, unique, but I think it has served our community well. And we also hold the agencies accountable through outcomes that they are required to report on through scorecards. So we have that information that we use as well.
So over $5 million in 1 year will be invested in how many human service agencies?
We have 32 agencies that are in the process and over 100 services that are provided. Some of those services may be duplicated across agencies. So we have 4 daycare agencies in the process. So they're providing, of course, daycare, few transportation services, rent and utility. And we really work hard on encouraging those agencies to coordinate and work together so that the dollars they get, especially from the public funders, are stretched as much as possible.
So does every city in Iowa have this asset process?
They don't.
I'm trying to lead you a little bit to kind of help give. So when they do the report, it'll look really impressive. So
Yes,
I think it's very unique.
it is.
And maybe just, we've been doing this for over 40 years.
Yeah. Yes, yep. It was
And-
under a different name prior to Asset, but it has been, and we've had other funders in the process that have withdrawn. We had our mental health region for a while. That was a funder and they withdrew. Department of Human Services was at the table to help for coordination purposes, and but they needed to withdraw a number of years ago when DHS reorganized. But so the core team, if you will, has been in place for many years.
And so you want to just review how much each individual group, there's 4 groups, Story County, how much are they investing this year?
Yep, this year they brought to the table a total of 1.8 million. And that their funding source, and I think that's important to point out too, because the funding sources are different across the funders. So the city uses local option sales tax to help fund the agencies. Story County uses some local option sales tax, but the majority of their funding is property tax. So it comes through their general services budget. United Way, of course, uses their donations that they collect, and they have about 1.1 million in the process for fiscal year 25. And then Iowa Student Government, it's student fees. And so their focus, of course, is on students, and they had a 3% increase, so $276,892.
And how much does the city make up?
The city made about a third.
And how much? How much money?
Oh, $1,924,570.
So almost $2 million of the $5 million is from city 1 cent sales tax that council goes ahead and invests back in our human service agency.
That is
Good, thank you.
correct.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few highlights in the report on services and some of the discussion that took place with the volunteers. The Red Cross, you might remember, they did not request funding from the city a year ago. They came back and did request that, and so we funded them at their request, and that's because disaster response is a priority for council. So we do value that service. The Salvation Army came with 2 new services in the process. The first one is a vehicle maintenance repair program, and that's to help people who need repairs done to their vehicles. They'll fund up to $300 towards that repair, and they're working with very specific automotive repair shops to do that. And if the balance of the repair cannot be burdened on the car owner or the vehicle owner, then Salvation Army will not move ahead with providing the funding. They want to make sure that the owner has some buy-in to this, and that Salvation Army isn't carrying the brunt of the costs. So they've been piloting it this year. It's been successful. So they came to Asset making the request for funding. And I think the beauty of this is then it helps people meet their own transportation needs and to get to jobs or get kids to school, daycare, those kinds of things. The other service that the Salvation Army requested funds for is emergency shelter. So this is something that they have been providing on a very limited basis the last few years, primarily on donations. And they do use hotels to shelter people. And so they've requested funding for that particular service. And from the city's perspective, we did provide funding to both of those services because they did meet priorities of emergency shelter, housing, and transportation.
I have a question, Deb.
Sure.
When we have a situation, so like sometimes our hotels are heavily utilized for an Iowa State game event or something. What do they do when we have one of those events and it's really a cold night and there's a high homeless population? Where do they go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Salvation Army has contracts with a couple of the hotels. So they use Ames Motor Lodge. And they do compete for that during the summer months because that's when a lot of the seasonal workers around here, that's because those rooms are typically rented out by week. And so they do compete for those rooms, but then they also use the Days Inn on Duff, and then I believe they also are using the Super 8. So they work with these hotel managers and make sure that rooms are available based on the history and the number of people that they've been serving. They see a lot of people when whether it's cold weather or hot weather, people are needing housing, and they see the same thing, and they try to work with the hotels and getting people in as quickly as possible. And people can stay there for up to a month. And that's through the asset process. That is what we identify for emergency shelter for the general population is 30 days at a location. So they can work on a housing plan and work on a more long-term commitment to their housing needs.
And that's super helpful. One follow-up. So one of the things that the Bridge Home does, I think, really well is to connect people with other services. So it's not just about housing, but it's connecting them with other different social service opportunities that they would need. Is that same thing happening if they're placed in a hotel? Are there efforts to try to connect people with services?
Yes. And yeah, to both Bridge Home and Salvation Army's credit, staff know the services and the resources in the community and even outside of the community, because sometimes people want to leave the community after they've had sheltering and they can move to the Des Moines area or some other location to be with family. And so the agencies will help facilitate that. The limitation with the Salvation Army right now is staff. But at the Salvation Army's agency hearing back in early January, they shared that they had been given the green light to hire case management staff. I don't know how many that means, if it's one or two, but recognizing that level of staffing is needed to help people get a job, move, sign up for other benefits, make sure kids are in school, that type of thing. So they are working on making that part of their emergency shelter service more robust because they.
Yeah, I'm not sure we've talked about that before, so that's super helpful that we're layering on those other services. Thank you.
Yeah. And Deb, can you give us some sense of how much our $5,000 contribution for emergency shelter provides for the community?
Yeah, so that's what the Salvation Army requested, and that's what's being recommended. That will probably be able to, because I'm trying to think of what their unit cost is. It's probably going to last maybe a couple of months. And they recognize that at the time they did this budget, it was back in September, and they've recognized that they are going to need more funding. They did get some grant funding this current fiscal year from United Way, and I think it was about $17,000. They've exhausted that. We are working on setting up a meeting with them to get a better idea of what they're going to need the remainder of this fiscal year, because we still have that $181,650 that we had set aside for an RFP and didn't award the RFP. Those dollars are still there. The city's portion of that is $66,258. So I speculate that there will be a request coming before council here in the next couple of months for those dollars to be provided to the Salvation Army to help with their sheltering at hotels. And then whatever may be left over those dollars, a request then to carry that over into fiscal year 25. And then based on the recommendations from the volunteers, we have additional funds set aside for emergency shelter in the amount of the city's amount is $117,322. So all in, when you think about the dollars that were set aside for the RFP and then the dollars from the city and the county United Way for emergency sheltering for next fiscal year, it's almost $400,000. And then there are some additional funds for service coordination and then for food. So with the Bridge Home, the recommendation coming from the volunteers is to not provide funding for their services. The shelter, especially because we were still working through that process for this current fiscal year, the volunteers felt that because there wasn't a solution at the time of the allocation process, that dollars needed to be handled the same way as they were last year and set aside. Funding for the rapid rehousing, which is rent, utilities, and service coordination. There are other funding sources for that. And given the increases that were requested, the units of service didn't necessarily match up. And so I think it unfortunately goes back to the work that we've been trying to do the last 3 years in understanding the budget, providing them some guidance on the budget, collecting their information through scorecard and trying to help finesse that a little bit more so that they understand the priorities of the funders. So that's where volunteers landed with the recommendations on the bridge home. It was hard. We know they provide services and are meeting some of the needs of the community, but we do feel we need to look at other options. We do continue to have conversations with primary health care as well with their coordinated entry process that they have in Des Moines, and we're interested in growing that here in Ames and Story County. So I will stop at that point.
Other questions for Deb? Deb, I just want to thank you on behalf of City Council and the Ames community. You have, people don't realize, but Deb has volunteered time to help bridge the gap from when she decided to transition to a different position. But your service has been invaluable, and I don't know what you'd do without all your help. And Pa, you won't have a better teacher than Deb. And I know you're only a phone call away if need be, but thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated, and your institutional knowledge is unbelievable. And I'm sure that Becky is thinking, Pa's going to be great, but I'm sure glad Deb's around too, right? Becky, thank you for your service too. I know you guys really care, and we've said it before at the funders meetings, this is probably the heaviest lift, I think, of any of our volunteer groups. You spend a lot of time and make a lot of decisions and crunch a lot of numbers, and we really appreciate your service. And I think the council has a lot of confidence in your recommendations. So anyway, all right.
Well, I would like to thank you, Mayor, and council and city staff. And this has always been one of my favorite roles in any organization I worked with that's involved with asset. But I'm very happy to be able to help Pa and the rest of the team. And just am very thankful for your support throughout the years and recognizing this important funding process.
And we know Pa is going to do an outstanding job too. So anyway, all right, very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, Brian, outside funding requests.
So the outside funding requests are those requests for city funds that don't really fit into our other funding programs. So this is a variety of wildly different types of contracts. The council approved a 5% increase in the size of the pot of money available for these requests this year. We've attempted as staff to make recommendations for how to allocate that money. It's an additional $14,716. And we've presented you with a memo that outlines the different requests and our recommendations. I do want to point out, so previously we have had requests from mostly the Ames Main Street organization, but from time to time Campus Town Action Association, to offer free parking type events in the business district. And we've required as a council policy that those types of requests be reimbursed, so that we reimburse the parking fund for the lost meter revenue with money from the local option sales tax fund. We previously required that those organizations make those requests in advance and that we budget for them. The challenge that we have with that is that from time to time there might be a request that wasn't foreseen. And additionally, we thought that these kinds of requests might be better financed through hotel motel tax revenues, which is used to finance economic development activities. So in addition to the 5% increase for the local option requests, staff is recommending that $10,000 be set aside in the hotel motel tax fund for parking waiver reimbursements. We would make the transfer of those funds to the parking fund as the events occur, which offer the free parking. Hotel motel is also the source of funding for the AEDC workforce initiative that we have customarily approved at a level of $15,000 each year. They're requesting the same amount again this year. So it's an additional $10,000 out of hotel motel to finance the parking component of those requests. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions?
Brian, is it your sense that that 10,000 will more than cover?
I think so. In previous years, the total amount has been 5,500 or so. And then I think we had an event here or there that might be another couple of $1,000s. So I think 10,000 ought to cover anything that we might encounter. Certainly, if there's a request beyond that, we would consult with the council and talk about different options that we might have.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, we'll move on to item E, other requests. Are there any other requests from council? Anything else from you, Brian, Steve, or Corey?
Yeah, that's going to be, no, it's going to be, yeah.
You good? All right. We'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda, public input on the capital improvements plan and the budget. We do have one individual who has expressed and signed up to address council, and Jennifer Hubbs, I believe. If you would like to come up and introduce yourself and then offer input on the capital improvement plan or the budget.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I do think there were some other people who signed up.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I think there were some other people who did sign up. I'm not sure.
We'll certainly invite them.
Yeah.
My list is all I've got right now is just you, but others can come up and talk as well.
Yeah, so I'm Jennifer. I volunteer at the Ames Animal Shelter, and I just wanted to come and express how important a new animal shelter is. I started volunteering at the animal shelter actually when my friend's my friend passed and his cat had to stay at the shelter. And my first interaction with the shelter to visit the cat was actually in what's called Per Villa, which is a trailer behind the shelter because they're just so overfull with all the animals that they have. And a new shelter would help tremendously from space. I think since I've started volunteering, there's been 2 hoarding cat cases that have, erased the minimal amount of space for animal adoptions and meetings and things like that. There's no room for any sort of community education or any sort of programs in that regard. And there's also been a zoonotic disease, I believe, that has also for a period restricted our movement and made it to where volunteers couldn't even come and socialize with some of the cats because of the layout of the shelter. And so I just wanted to express how important a new shelter would be. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Does anybody else like to address council on the capital improvement plan and our budget and the tonight?
Hi, my name is Cheryl Ripke, and I'm a volunteer at the shelter, and I've been there about a year. And I'm guessing that perhaps some of you have toured the facility and noticed that it's pretty crowded. I'm guessing also that maybe you didn't go during the morning cleaning time. Fortunately, I have a talent for cleaning litter boxes. I often show up in time to clean about 30 litter boxes, but there's no place to clean the litter boxes. So I go into the room we call the Tetris room, so designated because everything in there is so crowded and crammed together, you have to move something to get to something. I go in there and pull out a 55-gallon garbage can into the hallway, the doorway, because there's no place for me to clean the litter boxes. So I'm standing there with 30 litter boxes in the hallway while Morgan is trying to treat the animals that need medical care and examination. And Ashley is trying to clean the kennels. And other volunteers are trying to take care of the dogs and the rabbits and the hamsters. And everyone is convening in the shelter at this time to do the morning cleaning. And I'm in the way. I'm standing in the hallway in the way, and it's a lot of, oops, excuse me, oh, sorry, oh, because there's no room. And when I get the litter boxes wiped out, I take them into the animal kennel room. Well, there's a little bit of space where I can wash and rinse and sanitize these boxes, but I'm standing in a corner by a window with a cabinet in my face. And it's really hard to do this. And when I get the food dishes washed, there's no place to put them to drain, so I put them in the windowsill. And when I get the litter boxes all sanitized, there's nowhere to put those, so I climb up on a ladder and put them up on top of the cat kennels. I'm just trying to express that the people that work there make this work for the animals because they're dedicated and compassionate and they love these animals. And every animal is called by name. They don't say it's the cat in kennel 3. Every animal there, if not coming in with a name, is given a name. These people love them. They're professionals. They take the best care of these animals, but their working conditions are awful. So I beg you to prioritize funding for the animal shelter because it's needed. You have wonderful staff working there, and they deserve better working conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to address council on capital improvement plan or the budget?
Oh, good evening. I'm Ed Gettigan, one of the volunteers, and that's a tough act to follow. There isn't much more I can say. I mean, I don't clean the cat boxes, so I don't know that drill because I come later in the day. My wife and I, Laura Beeson, started volunteering about a year ago, and we were impressed that place is full. Have you been out there? Have you all been out there yet?
Yeah.
It's astonishing when you go in there and see. I've seen crowding, but I've not seen crowding like that. The bathroom is a storage space. There's a room that's about 80 foot square that has a washer, a dryer, a water heater, a furnace, a refrigerator, a sink, and some cabinets, and also a racks for towels that are taller than me. I can't even reach the top. I have to go up like this, and I'm 6'2", and I've got to put the towels up there. So it's astonishing. The dog place, there's no place to socialize dogs. The staff is amazing. They've won awards, as you know. That facility needs to be replaced with a new one. And it's going to be a good thing for the county, a good thing for the city, a good thing for the animals. And you'll do a really great thing if you update and replace that facility because it's time. It's time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any more comments? Otherwise, we're going to close public input. All right, we will close public input on the capital improvement plan and the budget. And either Steve or Corey, do you want to comment on when opportunities will be coming up? Or are you going to talk about that a little later in terms of additional public input?
We'll talk about it at the end.
Okay. And then, Steve, you want to just highlight, a number of people are here because they're interested in the animal shelter, just kind of discuss.
Sure, what's in the
comment-
budget itself?
Yeah, what's in,
Yeah.
what is planned?
So I pointed
for-
out that the capital improvement plan does not include 5 significant projects that are in our future. I laid those out to you, which is the animal control shelter, relocation of fire station number 2 out of the campus town area, probably along State Avenue. We talked about fire station 4, which will be needed as we continue to develop in accordance with a land use policy plan. We also are looking to develop for the first time our community park, which we just acquired the acreage, about 50 acres along Ontario, west out to County Line Road, and also the concept of an indoor recreation center, which would have indoor basketball courts, indoor soccer courts, and a legitimate running track. I think I pointed out to you that I've included in this budget, just so you know, to speak to the animal control shelter, I put $100,000 in there for this year, which will allow us to hire a consultant, which we do all the time prior to a bond issue, just like we've done for the swimming pool, that will allow us to develop a conceptual layout of the project along with costs, because costs are going to be very important. This type of project will probably be funded through general obligation bonds. And if it's like the swimming pool, you might ask for some donations. There's naming opportunities for the facility itself and maybe some of the rooms. So we have to get a layout, functional layout, and then a cost with it, and we'll bring it back to you, including $100,000 also. We're looking at the site to be moved just east towards the the dog park, right, adjacent to the existing site. We're going to have to do some geotechnical type of soils testing. We want to look to see if we can put in geothermal, so there's some work to be done there. Also, we're thinking about planting that land there, because all that land up to the Army Reserve is actually owned by the city. It's possible that we would plat that land, keep one of the lots for the animal controls, a new animal control facility, and perhaps if the council agrees, sell that land off, and make that land available for commercial development, which will bring it back on the tax rolls, and maybe we'll generate some revenue that we can help lower or pay for the animal control shelter itself, or for another purpose you might desire. So the first step in any of these projects would be the conceptual development plan and costing. I've also included money in there for a conceptual plan for the park, correct? Fire Station 2, we've got money in for that too. So we're trying to set this up so I can give you good information, so you can make prioritizations for next year. We put in the CIP. You'll have to make decisions on whether you want to have 5 bond issues in 1 year, or you want to spread them out. Once we decide the prioritization and the logical spacing and scheduling of these, then Corey can tell us the impact on our property taxes, because it will probably be paid for out of general obligation bonds, some of it at least, and then it'll affect our debt service portion of property taxes. So I think I've said publicly before, if we're going to rank these projects, I've said that the animal control shelter has my recommendation for the first highest priority. It's the existing building. It's inadequate, overcrowded. There's no doubt about it. The second requirement, I think, or the priority would be Fire Station 2, which we want to move out of there because of the safety issues. And actually, by moving it farther out on State Avenue, will improve our overall response time. Past that, station number 4 could probably be slid to the last project, because that'll have to be flexible. That will be needed in relationship to how fast we actually develop according to our Ames 2040 plan. So then the prioritization for the 3rd and 4th will be between the development of the park, the community park out west, or an indoor recreation facility. And there's a lot of work we have to do on that. So we probably won't put these into the CIP till next year. You'll have more information before you. We'll give you a lot more information on the impact of taxes and whatever. So we'll probably need a bond issue. We hope we have a generous public out there that agrees, just like they did with the swimming pool, and will donate some money to the project too. That's what we did with the swimming pool, if you remember. And maybe we'll be able to generate some extra money from the sale of the land if you so choose to use it in that purpose. So I think we have a plan to move forward. We're not in waiting, even though it's not in the CIP. I want everybody to understand we're moving ahead with some planning to obtain the necessary information you'll need to make a decision on those 5 projects.
So just for those that came to support that, we understand the need, and this is not going to move as fast as you want it to move. The legislature changed the law And now cities can only have one bond issue a year. It used to be 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. And it only can occur on election day in November. And this funding for this study won't even start until July 1. So the likelihood of that being a bond issue this year may be limited or not.
Yes, I wouldn't say we have that.
So the point is that it could not be, may not be until next 2025 a bond issue, which would mean that you wouldn't even consider or see breaking ground until 2026. So we understand the urgent nature of what's going on there. Ron and his staff and all of you do a phenomenal job. But we just don't want any kind of false illusions that all of a sudden we're going to start breaking ground in 6 months or a year, unfortunately. And if the legislature hadn't changed the laws, maybe a bond issue could have happened in the spring of next year. But that is not allowed anymore statutorily. We have only one option, and there's other requirements that are set forth on that. So.
Well, also, we need the information. We're setting the bond, remember, we're setting the property tax rates for next year, which includes November of next year. So you couldn't start anyway. Plus, we need to give some information, the operating costs. We don't have those operating costs of a new facility built into the 24-25 budget. So that's why it'd have to be a year after.
Yeah. So it's just as infuriating as it may seem that it's just taking so long. It's just, we don't have much choice in the matter. It's just, we got to work the system and the plan. But I think that council has been committed to and understands the need for it out there. And we do appreciate you all coming to express support for an important institution. And I think it's, thank you, because I don't like cleaning, I wouldn't like to clean litter boxes myself. So anyway, whoever does it, you're a hero.
So Steve, to clarify, the 100,000 for the conceptual plan, is that in this current fiscal year before?
It's actually in this fiscal year, but
Yeah.
the work will spill over to the next fiscal year.
Yeah.
I
So-
put that money in this current fiscal year, adjusted budget.
Yeah. So this fiscal year ends
Thanks for the
June,
clarification.
at the end of June. So
But the work won't be completed before this fiscal year.
Well, I think we should also clarify that there is money that will be put into repairs at the shelter
Yes.
and trying to bridge that very long time span and make it somewhat better for the animals and I hope for the volunteers who are doing yeoman's work. Thank you so much.
That's correct. There was extra money to the council. If they approve this budget, we'll be in there to fix the air conditioning there, plus some additional equipment that I understand. So we're not going to wait until the new facility to put that equipment. It's my understanding some of that equipment will be mobile and we'll be able to take it to the new facility. So we try to respond to the immediate needs of the department too.
You just won't add any space.
Just want any space, correct? No. It's still overcrowded and inadequate.
Yep.
Steve, worst case scenario, if there was a further increase in the population of the animals that we're caretaking, could we put in some kind of temporary unit to provide some overflow space if needed?
Yeah, we've done that already. We already have it. So we've filled that up too. You notice there's a mobile unit we placed in there too.
Right, but is
and a
there
lot of people
possibility-
work now. If they look around the other shelters, if they could help us, we help out other shelters. The more difficult ones are the hoarding cases. It's tough to build a facility that will take on those kind of situations. That's why I know some other cities will bring their animals to us if we need, and we'll help out, and vice versa. But it's inadequate even when you don't have the hoarding cases. Don't get me wrong. So yes, you could try to bring those, and they have to be inspected. They have to be inspected and approved. But we've done that. Unfortunately, temporary situation has been 2 or 3 years now to expand capacity, and it's still not enough. No doubt about it.
All right. We're going to move on to item number 3, final council decisions. And the first is, are there any amendments to the 2024-2029 capital improvement plan? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the 2024 to 2029 capital improvement plan as submitted to council.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we'll entertain amendments to FY 2023-2024 or our current adjusted budget. And would there be a motion to add $7,600 in local option sales tax funds to allow KHOI to be reimbursed for FY 2022-2023 funding, which was never drawn down.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any other amendments to the FY 23-24 budget, adjusted budget? And staff, do you have anything that you want to recommend or not? All right, hearing none, entertain a motion to approve the adjusted budget for FY 23-24 as just amended, including inter-fund transfers.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay, so amendments to the proposed FY 24-25 budget. We'll take these one at a time just to make it simple. First is CODA. FY 24-25 recommended budget, $240,931.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And the second item is on asset for human service agency funding for FY 24-25 budget of $1.924578 million. Recommended funding at this point would be $1,780,999, given the fact that there's a set aside of $143,579 in unallocated funding for emergency shelter services, which would be $117,322, housing services coordination of $6,000, and undesignated for mental health needs $20,257. Is there a motion on the recommendation and the budget?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Next, we'll take on public art. The requested $46,000 for FY 24-25 budget.
Move approval.
That's in the budget.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All right, move on to item number 4, outside funding request. The first outside funding request funded through local option sales tax for FY 24-25, recommended budget $309,035.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And another outside funding request is AEDC outside funding request for funded from hotel motel tax for workforce development in the amount of $15,000 for FY 24-25.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And then also from outside funding request is parking waiver reimbursement funded through hotel motel tax. Recommended 24-25 budget of $10,000. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Those, roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Are there any other amendments to the proposed FY 24-25 budget from council?
We have one more, I think.
Mayor, you'll recall that last week the council approved a union contract settlement with the police department. As a consequence of the settlement, in the next fiscal year, we're proposing making a modification to the number of authorized FTEs in the budget for the police officer position by removing one vacant full-time equivalent police officer position. There are a number of vacant positions at the moment, so this removal wouldn't impact the number of officers that are on the street at the moment, but it would be necessary in order for us to balance the obligations that we've agreed to in that union contract for the next year.
Questions? All right, I entertain a motion to accept the staff's recommendation and reduce FTE for police and animal control to 84.05 FTEs.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any other adjustments or amendments to the 24-25 budget?
I had one. Steve said this is when I should mention it. Right, Steve?
Pardon me.
Oh, I said this is, I had one other amendment to this one related to the fleet. I had a question when Fleet presented about having bicycles available, and Steve mentioned that this would be a good time to direct him to start a bicycle program.
Test program, yeah.
Sort of a test program that's for voluntary for staff to use. And I didn't have a budget amount. I thought I would leave that up to Steve in terms of how much to allocate. But
Is it something that would be in this next year's budget or something
No, I think we want to do it this year, right? This year.
well, I figured
Next year.
July is here almost
Pardon me?
anyway. So I figured July is around the corner anyway. So
Okay.
this is the 24-25. But
I just don't think it's substantial.
Right.
We'll try to do it out of our existing budget. If we need council contingency, we'll come back. We've got to cost it out and see how many buildings we want to use it at and things like that. I just don't have an idea right now. It's not
Small.
really substantial.
So is there, in staff's opinion, is there a need for an amendment to the budget?
I don't think so, but I think a motion just say that you want it in there would be good for me to document that, right?
Is there a motion?
A
Bella?
test program.
yeah, I would move that we direct the city manager to develop a test.
And you're talking
staff
about
bicycle.
electric bikes now, not
Yeah.
because we've had pedal bikes before.
Yeah. Electric bike program.
Moved to second. Any discussion?
Volunteer program.
Could you maybe sort of flesh out how would things be different if this was to be used?
Yeah, so there's a lot of cars parked out back that people use for various tasks around the city. And I think sometimes they need a vehicle if they're hauling a bunch of stuff or something like that. But sometimes I think a trip could be made using a greener method, like a bike. I think e-bike, I thought, because it makes them especially accessible. And you might even, I mentioned to Steve too, maybe some e-trikes, so people could get on them and go. It's not super physically challenging, but it's a health benefit too, but also it would add to our green fleet. But just have them available, and if staff wanted to use them, they could, not to mandate that a certain position would only ever.
And I have a question for staff. I mean, I can't think of another situation where we've done anything like this, where we've sort of suggested that the staff utilize different methods of transportation. I guess I would rather take a deferential posture and let staff decide. I mean, it's not effective from a time perspective. And so we're paying people to do jobs, and automobiles are going to be more cost effective. And so that's a factor, as well as, all the other concerns with weather and safety. And so could you speak, Steve, to this in terms of this is different, it seems to me, than anything we've done?
Well, I don't want to speak to that. I want to speak to the merits of the actual request. I don't think it's a bad idea to test it as long as it's voluntary, because I don't know we got to see how we secure it, how many people want to use it, what jobs would be appropriate for. I think it could be in keeping with our wellness program and also our sustainability program. So I think it's appropriate to look at. We're testing electric cars. We're trying everything we can. Again, I don't think as long as it's voluntary, and we get to test it out, and we'll see all the positive and negative effects of it. So I think it's worthwhile to try.
And how many bicycles?
I will have a committee that will decide that. You know, I don't think we're going to have one in every building to start off with, and probably people aren't going to ride from here to the water pollution control plant. You know what I'm saying? So there'll be some logic to what we test out. Going from Don-Com comes over here a lot of times from electric. Quite frankly, that's a doable distance. People come over from the library. Is that doable for Don?
Don's ready to ride a
Don?
bike.
Yes, we
Don
can
runs
tell.
over,
Ready.
but he'll be ready.
He has 2
He wants
thumbs
the
up.
electric
Yep.
bike.
All right, is there any other comments on this item?
Does that answer your question? I mean,
It does. I mean, I'm really quite reluctant to vote in favor of this because I want to make sure that we give our staff people the tools to do their job. What I'm afraid of is that we're going to, at some point, this will become a mandate and we'll
Right.
have our city staff having to ride bikes or trikes around town.
right.
And-
I would object to it. And I think I've said that if we make it mandatory for everybody, it doesn't make sense on every trip. So we're testing this out for a lot of reasons and see if we can show that there's a positive impact from it.
Would you read the motion back again?
Move to direct city manager to develop a test voluntary program for staff with electric bikes.
You're not asking me to come back and get okay on it. I'm just going to do it, right?
And it's stressed in the motion. It's voluntary.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Anything else?
So have we covered the 150,000 for the sculpture? Was that, okay.
Okay. Any questions? Entertain a motion to approve proposed budget for FY 24-25 as amended, including interfund transfers.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Council, I've asked Corey if he would just kind of review the schedule, in part because the legislature has added some other steps that we have to go through statutorily, and it impacts as we get public input and public hearings. I'll just ask him to kind of just highlight a little bit in terms of the impact it might have on the process that we're going through for the budget. So Corey, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. As you mentioned, the process is a little bit different this year. You can see the arrow there is where we're at tonight. So as part of the new process, statutorily, we're required to file our proposed tax rate with the county and the Department of Management. And what happens after that is that the county compiles the school districts and counties rates and compiles and puts them on what's called a property taxpayer budget statement. And those are mailed on March 20th to individual taxpayers. What the information included on that statement I have down below. Here's a sample, not directly related to us at this point, but what was provided by the DOM. It'll have our current property tax collection, our current rate. The effective tax rate is what you would have seen when we did the max property tax levy last year. That was that if we did not increase, if the city did not increase any collections, that would be the effective tax rate. So it would be less based on the increased valuation, the city's proposed tax rate, and then our proposed collection. So those items will go out to Ames City residents based on that information. And then in addition to that, at the bottom of the statement, it will have the impact for properties of $100,000 for both residential and commercial properties. So just an effort by the state to show the impact of property tax rates, valuation, and collections for cities. That will also contain a notice that we'll hold the public hearing on April 9th, at which time the public will have an opportunity to address council related to property tax collections. I think you may get other comments about the budget, but the primary purpose is a separate meeting to have discussion about the appropriate property tax rate and anything that was provided in that property taxpayer statement that they received. After that special meeting, we'll go into a regular meeting, and at that point, we would set the public hearing for final adoption of the budget on April 28th. And that would be back in terms of a standard process for adoption of the budget. If modifications were made anytime past April 9th, we would be limited to a reduction in property tax collection. So that's the statutory limitation, is that we're able to lower our property tax collection and lower our annual budget, but we certainly don't have the opportunity to increase any tax collections at that point.
Because the intent is on March 20th, when that mailing from the county auditor goes out, is to show every taxpayer what their maximum amount of taxes would be, tax rate for the coming fiscal year.
Yes, per $100,000.
Right. So we will not have another public hearing on this until April 9th. But the public can email, they can call council, and they can offer input
Absolutely.
if they want to. Okay. Any questions? All right, entertain a motion to set April 9th, 2024 as the date of final public hearing to adopt a property tax levy for FY 24-25.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Anything else, Corey?
No.
Nancy? Can you breathe a sigh of relief as you're... Oh, so you can't?
Not over yet.
All right. Well, thank you again for all your efforts. I know there's a lot of number crunching and a lot of guidance that you're offering council, and we greatly appreciate it. So,
Thank you.
all right. So we're going to just take a 1 or 2 minute break while staff gets reassigned, and then we'll move right into our regular meeting of the Ames City Council.
All the budgets. Yeah, sorry for being a little late.
All right, we will
Say, you figure.
we'll transition into our regular
Well, I
meeting.
accounted for it starting at 6. Then I saw the email and shoot.
Jeff?
It's awkward.
Jeff?
I have a.
Thank you. All right, moving into the regular meeting. Council, we're working from an amended agenda. There was one item that was added Under item 23 is resolution approving contract and bond for bid package 26-1, electrical communications, electronic safety and security work with Van Manen Electric Incorporated in Newton, Iowa. This is for the Fitch Family Aquatic Center. With that, are there any items that council wishes to pull from consent tonight? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve consent as amended on the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, we will move into public forum, time we set aside for individuals of the public to address council on topics of city business that are not listed on the agenda, and ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. And I actually have a couple of individuals listed, and if they're here, I'll start with Ed Godikin.
I think those are the animal shelter people.
Yeah.
Okay, and that would mean Eliana also then. All right,
Nope. Nope. Nope.
Eliana, I'm sorry. My apologies. You introduce yourself, and you may start.
Hello, my name is Eliana, or Ellie. I just want to try to communicate because I have struggled to communicate with you all. I've sent some emails and have received very little response. So the issue that I want to talk about is zoning. I think it's no secret that we have a housing shortage in Ames. It's also no secret that we have a priority to be responsible about the environment here. And I have struggled to understand how little movement or how little action we've seen from you all regarding zoning reform. Not to belabor the point, as I've already sent several emails. But I just want to reiterate that I really hope that you all will do something about it, considering the goals that you set out tonight, especially for the budget. You would think that instead of maybe, or in addition to appropriating money for social services, you might also think about policy change that costs nothing, that would improve the end, more equitable, or make Ames more equitable. And yet, we've seen very little from you. And I suppose this is the last thing. And I did express it in an email, but you did have a discussion about a climate action plan and didn't discuss density. And I, again, quite confused about how you can have a discussion about climate without discussing addressing density in Ames, which is very bizarre to me, at least. That's all. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anybody else wants to address council under public forum? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 31. Finance resolution to approve the annual comprehensive financial report with fiscal year ending FY 30, ending June 30, 2023.
All right. Good evening again. Tonight I have Kara Natty. She's our accounting and reporting manager, and we have some information related to our annual audit or annual comprehensive financial report she's prepared to present tonight. So I'll let you take it away, Karen. I'll work on the slides.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Our independent auditors, Eide Bailey, completed our 2023 annual comprehensive financial report audit, and I'm bringing it to you for acceptance before distribution to our stakeholders and application for Excellence in Financial Reporting Award. This finalization occurred over 3 months earlier than last year's ACFR due to accounting division staff experience and implementation of improvements made between the audits. I would briefly like to highlight a few numbers from the city's ACFR, all of which are excluding our component units, Mary Greeley Medical Center and Mary Greeley Medical Center Foundation, in hopes to better present the city's financial health. I'd like to summarize the independent auditor's finding and discuss our next steps. Our first financial highlight is an overview of our net positions related back to the table on page 16 of the ACFR. That was one of the attachments, so I'll be citing it, but it's on there. The net position is the difference between the assets and liabilities. You can see the net position increased for both the city's governmental funds by approximately 15 million and business type funds by approximately 25 million from last year. These increases can be contributed to in part by costs or CIP carryover projects and capital asset purchases. The financial highlight shows a portion of the change in government activities from page 31, Statement of Revenues, Expenditures, and Changes in Fund Balances. In the general fund, you will see a positive net change of a little over $2 million. The other financing sources in the general fund, right above the 2 million, the 8.9 million, is made up of non-operating revenues and expenditures, and it is primarily electrics payments in lieu of taxes and local option sales taxes. This slide highlights a summary of the change in our larger business type funds from page 35, Statement of Revenues, Expenses, and Changes in Fund Net Position. Transit's detail is from page 117, it's combining Statement of Revenues, because it's still a non-major fund. The 2.3 million transfer out of electric is the payment in lieu of taxes portion of the 8.9 in the previous slide to the general fund. It's other funding resources.
Just a quick assumption as you look at this item. I mean, this is a really positive slide. Had the net change at the bottom been negative, that would have been cause for concern. But basically, what Kara is indicating is that we're increasing our fund balance, which is a positive thing, particularly going into next year. We have a significant number of capital projects, so definitely a positive outlook, I think, as you look across these net changes.
Thank you. This slide highlights the fund balances from the bottom of page 29's balance sheet for governmental funds. Fund balance is the remaining balance after the assets have been used to satisfy the outstanding liabilities. Fund balances can mitigate current and future risks and help ensure stable tax rates. The 5 types of fund balances classified above, with a few City of Ames examples, they go from the most restricted fund balances at non-spendable to the least restrictive, which is unassigned. The non-spendable line will either never convert to cash or must remain intact pursuant to legal or contractual requirements. The City of Ames has inventory, prepaids, perpetual care principal, and aquatic center endowment in this category. The restricted fund balance are resources that cannot be changed or redirected by management. It's stipulated by creditors, grantors, laws. The City of Ames has the debt service, aquatic center, street construction, public safety pension, general obligation bond projects, library, developer projects. Our committed fund balance is formal constraints placed by action of the government's highest decision-making authority. This includes bike trails, park and rec capital projects and special revenues, environment and economic betterment, green energy projects, housing assistance, public art donations. Our assigned fund balance is the intentional constraints on resources by governing board or its appointees. The City of Ames has park and rec maintenance, fire, public works, airport, city hall maintenance, and the unassigned is just the residual amount after everything else is calculated. The government funds have unassigned fund balance greater than 12.2 million, which you can see on the far right, green arrow, when all other non-spendable, restricted, committed, and assigned balances have been calculated. The general fund alone has a fund balance of 16.3 million.
Can you go back? What the non-spendable is what again?
I'm going to refer to my notes quick. I get nervous up here.
Good job.
It is
think it's
They must remain in its legal or contractual requirements.
so like inventory or like things we've prepaid for, those type of things.
Perpetual care principal and aquatic center endowment. We can't do anything.
So the $3 million, do you have any idea what in non-major funds that would be like? I'm not looking for anything other than just trying to understand that.
I would assume a majority of that is some form of inventory, so we'd have to look into that. But that number seems to be an inventory item. Yep.
That's good. Thank you.
I jumped ahead on her here.
Yeah, well, I was like going to write it down because I can get back to you on exactly what that is after. Well, good. This is the highlight. This is the last 10 years. It's from page 132 in the ACFR, and it's just the general funds net position comparison year after year for the last 10 years. You can see the general increase in the fund balance. Increases are mainly due to timing of capital improvement projects.
So I think this shows the financial stability and just overall health of the city's general fund. So just an important slide as we look past for the last 10 years. So
our independent auditors report summarized their results on page 162. There you can find that the report issued is unmodified or clean. An unmodified opinion from the auditors means they provided a reasonable level of assurance that the financial statements present a true and fair reflection of the entity's results for the period reported. We did have material weakness identified in internal control over the financial reporting due to the accounts receivable mistake and the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, which we call CFA. We describe those discrepancies in more detail in your council action form.
Next.
Yep.
But on that, just to stay with that, we have made corrections. This was what you surfaced, right?
So the auditors found where we needed to add it. So we added it before it was printed or finalized.
are you asking about action to prevent it in the future?
Right.
Is that, yes. So I think we have, Kara's got a slide on that. I think.
Okay,
I mean,
cool.
We can let Corey answer. The condition of material audit adjustments to accounts receivable and CFA are stated on the council action form. Our response is agreeable, and the accounting division will schedule additional cross-training, create or update standard operating procedures, and highlight internal controls. To date, we have had an accounting division team meeting and discussed the need for scheduling our cross-training by role and updating checking procedures, including internal controls. Our grant accountant has started the grant improvement process by meeting with a member of Public Works who work together on communication, transparency, and timeliness. A federal grant checklist has been created and will introduce improvements with the remaining grant stakeholders when ready.
So I think that's what you're kind of referencing, Tim. So we've started to look at our process and procedure, and Kara's been with us, 3 years now? Almost 3 years.
October.
So it's an opportunity for growth for, I think, for all of us to reacquaint ourselves with our processes and making sure that we're doing things in accordance with the recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Good, thanks.
It looks like in the report, there was a couple of them were just like federal grants that we got that just they got in the wrong line. Is that correct? I mean, it's primarily that kind of situation, or?
The CFA was the federal grants. So we had the receivables and then we had CFA, and it wasn't in the wrong line. They weren't included originally. And then once we turned it in and started working with the auditors, we added them. Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time to present a few City of Ames financial report highlights, independent auditor summary, and future steps. I look forward to a few more months to implement improvements in the grant and financial reporting areas before the audit starts again.
Questions for Kara or?
Yes, questions.
Did you say that this process actually got underway 3 months earlier than in the past? Because
Well, we finished 3 months earlier because we were way behind since I've started.
So
it was me
So
learning.
I think one thing I would say is that our staff has been gaining more experience, particularly in governmental accounting. So, and Kara's been doing a great job to work through some of those things so that we can present this audit ideally before we start the budget process. So we know where we're at and presenting that information to you. And that's always been the case, is we start from a base and then construct the budget on that. And so that's why it's so important that, that our team finish this in a timely manner. And I think Kara did a good job with it this year, and her team, I should say. So.
That's great.
Just a couple clarifications. So this auditor, is this a new auditor for us?
No, nope. We just went out. I just was up here with the council action form maybe last year. And Ide Bailey out of Dubuque, I believe, is who we've been using since long before I started.
So this is the one we use every year?
Yes.
Okay, I'm misunderstanding this. And so is there value periodically to changing auditors just to give a different set of eyes on our procedures?
So we do have different auditors having eyes on our procedures as the last step. They do within their office, they do the partner at their office, and then they send it to outside office. So far it's always been outside the state even, and they've been different.
Okay, this is coming back to me. So same organization, but they assign it to different.
Yes.
They're a sizable firm, so they send it to different partners who then re-review the I guess the field work that the auditors did here locally.
Okay. And then just again, we sort of talked about this, but are there any other things that you think would be helpful for the council to know about remedial steps that we're seeing out of? I mean, it looks like a pretty clean bill of health, honestly.
So last year we had a capital asset finding. So we put a lot of our time in I call it our off season, but in between audit time to improve that. And so that we're hoping to do grants. Our accounts receivable was a weird thing that the auditor said, I don't think that'll happen again. So it's just one of those things we got caught and we'll know to look for it. And so yeah, the remedial, we're just trying to improve our communications.
Yeah, I think one thing that we talked about during the budget season was the budgeting reporting system, and that will play a role in expediting the process and providing additional time to review our process and procedures. So I would say, we have a limited staff who performs the work on the audit. I mean, everybody contributes, but as we free up their time, that allows them to do additional work in digging and preparation. So I think that's an important step that we talked about, and we made clear to management staff and to you that that's a big component of us preparing the audit every year. And so we're hoping that will expedite that.
And so is this a multi-year contract with this CPA firm, or do we do an RFP on a year-by-year basis?
I need to bring a requisition up here every year, but I feel like it was a 5-year.
You have a renewal.
Yeah.
And do like
So I think we bid a 3-year contract with annual renewals. So that's the lock-in price. Otherwise, we see significant increases in our auditing costs. So we will come back with a recommendation. It'll probably be on the consent agenda since we've already signed the agreement. We're just
Okay.
back for.
And that's helpful. Last one. So the state auditor also looks over our books, right?
We send after tonight, they're part of our distribution. If you guys decide to approve it, then we distribute it. And yes, the state auditor is one of them, but they just post it on their website as far as I know.
Yeah, the state auditor performs some audits of typically smaller communities or instances where there's, I think, wrongdoing potentially or considered wrongdoing, but they don't audit our particular statements, no.
So they're just putting an extra set of eyes on ours, not performing their own independent audit.
No.
Okay.
So that certificate for excellence and achievement, the GFOA goes through this, and it's not an audit, but they give us findings and ways to improve. And we got the certificate this year with stuff to look at. And then after tonight, I will do that tomorrow and we'll see. So they will look at it and make sure all of our numbers add up in the supporting documents to the government wide correctly and that kind of stuff. So it's not an audit, but it's not just Ide Bailey.
Okay, great. Thanks for the help with those.
Any other questions? I just have 2 comments. One is the audit. Every year the auditor calls. He has to talk to an elected official to see if I know of any known collusion or ne'er-do-well, operations. And I just want to say, are you kidding? It just gives me so much pride. Just tell them absolutely not. I just know, look at the people who are doing the work and just have the confidence, in that. So we're pretty fortunate here to have an outstanding, finance department and under Steve's leadership as well too, and push for integrity. And the auditor was very complimentary on the improvements that have been made and just the speed at which things are really getting get done, quicker too. So it was always has been a pleasant conversation, but even more pleasant this year when he said, yeah, we're going to get done, quite a bit sooner than we did, previously. So anyway, just passing those on so the public knows too that people looking outside are complimentary of what we're doing fiscally. So good job, Corey and Kara and Steve and your team. Oh, and Nancy, if she's here. She probably left. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? I'll entertain, open up public comment. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic tonight? See now, we'll close public input. Entertain a motion on resolution to approve the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending June 30, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Carrie. Did a good job. Thanks, Corey. All right, moving on to item number 32, Ash Pond closure and RDF Ash Pond construction. I can just tell Mr. Com is just anxiously awaiting your questions and
Just report the bids.
any questions? All right, declare the public hearing on this project to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address City Council on this particular project? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing to be closed and entertain a motion to accept the reported bids and delay the award to provide staff adequate time to review same.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Don, take your bike back, will you?
Okay.
Walk.
Okay, walking tonight.
All right, moving on to item number 33. Rezoning of parcel of land 102-116 Highland Avenue.
Good evening, council. So tonight you have a rezoning application for the campus garage property at Highland and Lincoln Way. We had a discussion this summer about implementation of Plan 2040 and how this is an urban corridor designated area, but we have yet to really implement that designation. And there was a question of what's the appropriate zoning district. The property owner has an interest in continuing their operations at that site as a vehicle service facility. And at the same time, understands that maybe long-term, that's not the vision of the city for where we maybe prefer more intense use there. So to facilitate their expansion of a non-conforming use, the decision was to pursue a neighborhood commercial zone. And the rationale for that zoning district is that it allows for mixed use, it allows for residential, and also includes kind of the urban corridor character of allowing it to be moved up to a street if the site's redeveloped in the future. So it doesn't give unbridled use of that site to a lot of different uses, but it does let the current vehicle service facility pursue some improvements on the site as a non-conforming use. So we think it's a pretty good balance of trying to address immediate needs of the property and the business owner, but also still seems to be consistent with our vision for Plan 2040. So staff is recommending that we change this zoning district on the property. There is a master plan that accompanies it, and one of the elements of support for this is that the master plan does require some frontage improvements concurrent with future improvements that they plan to do on the site. So we talked about this in the summer. There's some improvements that will be done to manage the parking and the storage on the site. It's very haphazard in this current time. So with the master plan, they kind of redesigned the parking and storage areas, add some separation from the sidewalk. And again, we're getting a better site incrementally as the owner invests in the site. So overall, we want to recommend approval of this as being an improvement to the site as well as consistent with our long-term goals.
Thanks, Kelly. Questions?
Kelly, this is the guy who basically got himself in trouble because he put down gravel on a piece of dirt.
Vacant lot, yep.
Yeah, pretty serious. So what's the end game for this property? If we approve this tonight, what happens to the parking?
So his next step is, once you've created the zoning and expansion of a non-conforming use for site improvements, has to go to the zoning board of adjustment. So he has submitted for a special use permit to do that. So he would be going to the zoning board of adjustment in March, assuming they approve the plan for the parking and paving improvements. He's expected to complete those this spring. So in our normal kind of code enforcement, as long as we're in process for conformance and approval, it stays kind of in a neutral state, but he understands that the expectation is he has to construct this spring, and he's committed to doing that. So it's not just a bunch of process hoops we're jumping through. He intends to, and he must complete these improvements this spring.
Yeah. Just as a comment, I really appreciate just sort of the staff's perspective of bringing flexibility. I love just sort of the mindset that you brought to this. We could have taken in a variety of different postures. This seems like a very common sense, reasonable outcome for this property. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
Other questions? All right.
Question, I just want to say, I love the fact that this zoning allows us to have that landscaping along the borders, because it's such a horrible lot right now with the.
Yeah, I think when the property owner understood where we were and with where we were for the code enforcement action, and we asked the question, well, what are you really trying to do here? And it opened up a better dialogue and realized there was this win-win situation, that it kind of really fit for him, and I think for us to go this route.
And the community. Absolutely. Benefits our community. All right, I declare the public hearing on the rezoning with the master plan of 102 and 116 Highland Avenue to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Is there any further questions of staff?
Did he know it was on the agenda tonight?
He should have. I believe Justin Moore was the planner, and I talked to him this afternoon about both the next one also, which has no obvious participation either. I believe they knew that was on the agenda.
Okay.
All right, entertain a motion, and I'll refer just to, there are 3 alternatives, and instead of reading through the entire alternative, is there a motion on alternative 1?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And Grace, you can pick up that from the cast. All right. All right. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Move on to item number 34, hearing on rezoning of 210 South 5th Street, where Boys and Girls Club is located, from agriculture A to highway-oriented commercial.
Okay, I'm not sure why I have a screen but no image. This one is also pretty.
I think everyone's got the on their
on extension. Okay. I'll just say if it gets up, there we go. I just wanted to bring this up so we could. I think we're all familiar with where the Boys and Girls Club is on Southeast 5th. So the site's already been developed. It's kind of a little bit of an oddity that they developed this site over 20 years ago in agricultural zoning at the time, and this area has always been designated as open space, and ag zoning is our typical default because you can't really do much. Surprisingly, you could build a Boys and Girls Club in ag zoning, but that was what was done. And as they look at their expansion, obviously ag zoning doesn't really fit an urban model. So they want to rezone to highway-oriented commercial to allow for the expansion of this facility. And we believe that in this case, with the adoption of Plan 2040, you can see how 3 land uses are coming together here. In Plan 2040, we were trying not to be extremely rigid on those transition properties. So staff is supporting this rezoning based on the fact that it's already been developed because commercial, and that transition makes sense here on a developed property, and not having to think through, well, do we need to amend a land use plan and go through those extra steps here? If this was a vacant lot, I don't know that would reach the same conclusion, but with having commercial development, it's pretty easy, I think, to support this as a rezoning rather than a land use change. What I really want to point out here that's important is the south portion of the property, I don't have that up apparently, has the floodway on it. So there are 2 zoning districts here, and they will be retained as an environmentally sensitive overlay. So we're going to go from ag with an environmentally sensitive overlay to commercial with an environmentally sensitive overlay. Ultimately, that means that a parking lot expansion that's proposed with the building will have to come back to city council if they extend it into the floodway. And I think that is one of their intents, is to bring that into the floodway. So at this point in time, there's no impact from the rezoning on the floodway or any other natural resources here. And then you will see a major site plan to address the design of that parking lot extending into the floodway.
They cannot build a building in a floodway, though. Is that correct?
You cannot do a building. So you can do essentially flat work. And what you have to, why you're coming through this process is by default, you have to prove no rise, which is a floodplain issue. but we also want to make sure no one's encroaching into natural resource areas or causing some other kind of disturbance. So the parking lot should be pretty minor. I don't expect any issues when it does come forward, but that is why we have the environmentally sensitive overlay. And the building itself does need to be flood protection requirement. So the floodplain extends all the way across the property. So that fringe area does require flood protection. So then in this case, as an existing building, you can't easily elevate. So there's some combination of different flood proofing mechanisms that are going to go into this building addition as well. So it's been quite a bit of effort to design through this. The floodplain sites are tricky. And their design team spent a lot of energy trying to figure out how to meet the interests of the Boys and Girls Club, but also meet all of our flood protection requirements at the same time. So the rezoning does not change any floodplain requirements. It does permit the use to be developed under commercial standards with lower setbacks than what ag zoning has.
Questions?
So are the floodway requirements that we have right now rolled up in what the legislature is considering for stormwater?
No.
Okay.
No.
So if we rezone this, we don't have to worry that suddenly things are going to loosen up on this property and.
Right. So the floodplain, which is chapter 9, is discretely different chapter of code. It's authorized through DNR code, through floodplain management, delegated down from FEMA. So it's a whole different chain of authority than what the stormwater management requirements are, which come through the EPA. It's unrelated at this point.
Thanks.
Is a current building floodproof?
I want to say it does not meet current standards because we would not have had the 3 feet of protection requirement when it was built. So I think it has some floodproofing, but does not meet current requirements.
Got it. Okay. All right. I declare the public hearing on the rezoning of 210 South 5th Street from agriculture A to highway oriented commercial HOC with an environmentally sensitive overlay to be open. Address council on this topic. Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed, and I would entertain a motion. Excuse me. To approve the request to rezone 3.22 acres of the property at 210 South 5th Street from A agriculture with an OE environmentally sensitive overlay to HOC highway oriented commercial district with an OE environmentally sensitive overlay.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll move on to item number 35, entertain motion on second reading of pre-approval of industrial tax abatement for research and development building at 300 South Bell Avenue.
Move on second.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Abstain, conflict of interest.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to disposition of communications. And we have 5 items tonight. The first is a email from Jeremy Thede regarding slow pitch softball field conditions. And I think you've all received, there's actually, staff has done a outstanding job of responding, and it's actually, I'm going to give any input. I mean, there's work being done already, and he's
Keith is meeting with them. They're going to go over the issues and see if we resolve them. So
yeah,
he's handling for you, I think. We'll see if we handle to his satisfaction, but we'll see.
So there's really no action on this one necessary. Secondly is a memo from Steve regarding a recommendation to increase Ames Human Relations Commission membership from 5 to 7.
And do we need to put that on an
Future agenda.
Yeah.
I've given you 3 options. You can reject it and not move on from here. You can put on an additional item on a discussion, or you can move ahead directly with the attorney and just draw up the ordinance. I think it's a pretty simple change to go from 5 to 7. So do you want to put an item for discussion, or you want to move ahead to let the attorney redraw it? It'll come back then for approval where you can discuss it.
I would move that we have the city attorney draw up an ordinance so that we can discuss this in ordinance form.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Carried. All right, next is the a request from Ames Main Street regarding a parking time limit waiver for Main Street, Iowa convention or training session that's coming to town Tuesday, March 5th and Wednesday, March 6th. Is there a motion to either grant or deny the request?
I would move we deny the request.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So we've gone back and forth on these, and so my goal is to try to be consistent. Is Brian still here?
Mhm.
Brian? Maybe I'll pull you in on this. So can you give the council any kind of perspective on where we are in terms of, do we approve all of these? Do we deny all these? Is there some kind of test that we apply? How should we do this?
Well, this is a little bit different. What Brian deals with is waiver of parking meters and the revenue lost. This has to do with just, they're asking that we waive enforcement, the 4-hour enforcement is all CDBD lots for this event. I'm not sure we had a similar request. I'm not really sure either whether they said we will work to identify the spring workshop of attendees. They're just asking that we not enforce it so anybody can park there.
I think what they're saying is that they don't want it enforced for the attendees, so you'd have to give them a hang tag
Oh.
or something.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, then you've got to decide who are you going to grant that, other people downtown might have a wedding or they might have some other kind of thing and promotion and a business. Who are you going to give this to? The right to have people have hang tags to waive the 4-hour parking. I don't think we've had a request like this.
Is there any precedent?
I think we may have had this request before from Ames Main
Mhm.
Street. I would have to go back and look
Yeah, I
for
don't
sure.
remember.
But I think we have done this before. There is no revenue component to the request. It's just whether we would exempt them from the 4-hour limit.
I think we've had it before too, and I think maybe it was in the city hall parking lots as opposed to the CBD lots, but I
I'm not
don't know
certain.
why I'm thinking that.
And that lot is the one that's south of Wells Fargo and Main
Yeah, it's
Street.
the whole city. They're asking for the whole CDB lot.
Yeah, X, Y, and Z.
I mean,
So to be clear, they're asking just for that lot. So if someone parks on the street in a meter, if they park someplace else, they're not going to have a waiver for that.
Right.
All right. Is there a motion or we have a meeting next Tuesday night for a workshop and then we have a meeting in 2 weeks. Is there an interest in Brian looking for, if it's been approved before, or you want to just go ahead and motions are made and seconded, ready, correct?
Mhm.
Deny.
My thought on this, I care more about being consistent than I feel about on a particular issue. I don't think it's good governance to just, we approve this one, we don't approve that one. So my recommendation is that we come up with some kind of coherent policy so that future councils can follow this. It's not that we can't depart from it, but it just feels very random right now.
All right, those.
I would be willing to withdraw my motion if people think it would be beneficial to get more information on what we've done in the past.
I think if it's easy for Brian to check that I believe we approved it in the past, but I don't know that it was as many people, and this is
65
Main
to
Street.
75.
It's a Main Street America visit as well, which I don't think it was previously.
Right.
So I would be interested in,
All right, so are you gonna?
Yeah, I can withdraw.
Yeah, withdraw. Okay, is there a motion?
I would move that we have staff look into what was done in the past and bring it back to us at our next meeting. Is that possible?
Yeah, I could bring you a memo for the.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. All right, we have two items from Kelly. both regarding the Iowa State University Research Park. One has to do with comprehensive plan land use designation, and another one is mixed use residential.
So we've given you a lot of information. We're not here to discuss the merits of this issue. The question is, do you just want to deny the request and not move on? If you want to consider it, I think Kelly's recommending we put both these on a future agenda. They deal with introducing the concept of residential in the research park, which is not contemplated. One in the hub building where you allow, the first floor would be the typical research and development offices with apartments on the second floor. There's another one deals with 100% apartments in a certain area. It's a decision you have to make with changing the rezoning, but we can't get into it now. It's just, if you want to pursue it, we need to discuss it first before you give any direction, I guess. Or you would just say you're not interested in either one of those right now.
I think it's interesting. I think it's complicated. And not to start a conversation, but I'm about to. So in terms of the tax classification, so the research park pays taxes. And if these buildings are reclassified in the way that they're proposing, how does that affect the way in which we view the classification of those buildings?
Can we
But
even talk about that?
I think the question is, do you want to talk about these particular issues
Or not.
at a meeting on this topic?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would move that we put them on a future agenda for discussion.
Both items 4 and
Both
5.
items.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Sorry, Kelly. I think
Good
it's.
answer, Kelly.
I was excited too.
I think, as you said, Tim, it could be complicated, and that's why I think it warrants being on the agenda to
Yep.
get all the information. And,
It's interesting.
yeah. All right. Move on to council comments. Jeff, nice to see you back.
Good to see you guys too. Sorry for being a little bit late. I had an exam. I
That's
would have gotten
okay.
here earlier if possible, but still good to see everyone. Midterms are in full swing. You know, most people are tackling their first exams of the semester, so everyone's digging into the books. That's about it.
Is there any conversation yet about a joint meeting between city council and student government? Normally we do that like in either March or early April.
Yeah, not yet, but I'll bring it up tomorrow at the next meeting.
Okay.
We'll start working on that, getting an agenda for you guys to look over. And we can work together on that.
Probably would lean more towards the end of, very end of March if that would work out, or very early April if you want to just check and see if that would work, and then we'll need to coordinate that with council.
Sounds good to me. I'll
And-
get a date out for you guys as soon as I can, or multiple if that's preferred.
Yeah, get some options. Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right. Robin.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Nita?
Just a thank you again to all staff getting us through the budget process, and special thanks to Deb again for all she's done. So
Thank you.
nothing for me. Nothing for me.
So Sunday, there was a little football game. And just wanted to point out that one of our own was quarterback of one of the teams. And this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, probably, just I would guess.
We hope not.
Yeah, we hope not. But it's just such a unique opportunity for Iowa State to have a representative, and just so proud of the way Brock Purdy has been an ambassador for Iowa State and for the city of Ames. And what a great game, and just look forward to many more opportunities for him to be an ambassador for our community. Thanks.
Well, in that sports vein, am I right in saying that the Iowa State men are now ranked number 10
Number 10.
Wow.
in the nation? So, and the women are playing well for the most part. Some pretty impressive performances. So lots of sports.
All right. That entertain motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.